All right, good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Low Code Campfire, episode number 48 for April 29, 2022. Today we have a main topic of best practices for multi-environments, but we'll be talking about a lot of things. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Dale Warner. I'm head of support for Plantin'. We do this event weekly and record it. It's all skill levels welcome conversation that we have with our low code enthusiasts community. The recordings get posted to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/plantin', and we hope you subscribe to that and hit the alert button so you get new content when we post it. We do roughly this agenda where we say hello, and then we'll talk about first call, any contributions to the Campfire website, the community shared website. Sometimes we talk about feature requests. We always talk about whatever topics you submit in advance. And after we go for a while, we'll close the meeting, turn off the recording, and have an afterglow session. Just as we watch the embers die down, we can talk about anything else. And if you're in the appropriate time zone, you can have an after work drink. The guidelines, just if you've got noise going on behind you, please mute, and you can submit questions and topics in advance. That's that link is on the emails that we send to you, and also this QR code. With that, I'll say hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dale.
Good morning.
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 I do not see anyone new today, so no need for special introductions. Let's go right on to first call. What's on your mind? What challenges are you facing?
I have a memory jog question.
Yeah, this whole job is about memory, Jim.
So I know in a past, I have a problem where a form is not showing up on the gear icon except when the page is in edit mode. And I know somebody mentioned that problem once before in the past, but it's something simple that keeps it from doing that. But I couldn't find it on any videos.
I believe it's the container that the module is in.
And do you know what we have to do to the container to get it to show up?
Well, if you use a page builder container, I believe that'll fix it and it'll show up.
Oh, okay. All right. I will go check.
I think there's also a checkbox in module settings to display the container. And if you untick that, it only gets shows in edit mode. So that might explain why it works in edit mode.
Okay, that's probably the case because we have done that in the past to turn off headers and things like that. Okay, I'll go look. Thank you.
Good question. I had not encountered that one before. What else is going on?
Hi, Dale. We're probably the reason for the agenda item on managing environments. So I thought I'd just put my hand and say that's top of mind for us to figure out how best to take something that's developed in one environment, so a dev environment, and move it to test, and then likewise to production.
Yes, I absolutely. You were the inspiration for that, but you know, this is something that we want to be good at and to be able to explain. So I'm glad for the question. And I'm okay to move right on to that if there's no other first call things. Let's do that. So I've got that down here someplace. Yeah, there it is. So we're developing this list internally, but we want to make sure that we didn't miss anything. So we wanted to open up and see what for those of you who are doing this, moving content between development, test, production, or just development, production, what tricks, what steps that you always use to make that process work well. So if you're in that circumstance, I would appreciate that you participate a little bit. We started our list, and one of the first things, of course, is that migration is manual at this point. We're working to do a very nice integration with Git to be able to move things, and I hope to be able to start showing some of that in the weeks and versions to come. But it's manual, so you've got to move things. One of the first ones we identified, and I don't know if anybody's mentioned this to you, Andrew, was this one, that we have an export link inside the form settings, and that's not a good one to use for the purpose of transporting from one environment to another.
Yeah, Bogdan mentioned that one to us already, so we're aware of that.
Good. And was that one of the things that you were doing, that was you were losing settings, or do you know?
To be honest, I don't think so. However, so I'm not the developer who's been doing this.
Yep.
It's unfortunately they're not here today, but there was all sorts of manual manipulation being done to essentially recreate entities and action forms from one environment to another. So there was JSON manipulations and identifiers that had to be picked up and remapped into the other environment.
Yep. So spending a quick minute on that particular one that I mentioned. The action form has an export button, and it exports a lot of content, and this can be useful. It's designed around exporting the fields. The fields and buttons get exported, and you can get them out in a variety of formats, but it doesn't export everything like the settings, and I think it doesn't export these events either. So when you're faced with that, when you're going to move a form from one system to another, DNN has this gear icon export content, and so that's the one that we recommend to use when you're transporting. It's not
Okay.
It's going to be flawless. It's just that it's you're definitely not picking up everything. So
Okay. I appreciate you guys writing up those best practices. Is there some back-end queries that could assist us in comparing environment 1 to environment 2? So we do a lot of database manipulation on our side, but it would be nice to say, well, okay, of the probably 100 settings and mappings to identifiers from a small solution, whether that be a combination of an entity and an action form, is there a way to take the whole thing and dump it into a spreadsheet so we can compare environment A to environment B? Is there any tools that you guys already have that could assist with that?
I'm pretty sure there's not.
Okay. I guess a related question then, is there some output of knowledge on the back end structure, like the hierarchy of tables that exist in the back end, that we could then say, okay, based on whatever hierarchy there is, understanding of the storage, that we can build our own queries? It's kind of a broad question, I realize, but I think that would be helpful for us.
So the that I'm aware of, there's no external documentation for the tables that are behind and how they're structured. And you know, I'm just weighing part of our. I mean, I understand you probably have an immediate need to be able to do this well, and then versus trying
That's
to.
correct.
Yeah, versus trying to do this in a. We are actively working on the movement, the Git repository version, and so I would say the question is going to be: do we spend time documenting that, or do we spend time making it where it's a good experience? So
Fair enough.
But I mean, that's my reaction. I'm just telling you the kind of discussions that we'll get into. And by the way, when we get done with today, and I've got some other developers to talk to about this particular topic, we're assembling these, but we'll bring this into our product meeting, both as trying to get the product right, and then figure out how we're going to respond to providing this best practices. So.
Okay. Another question on the Git side of things. We of course don't use Git as yet. We use GitLab whenever our vendors use GitLab, and that's where we keep the repo for our DNN site.
Yep.
And internally we use SVN Subversion. So is there any flexibility? I'm not asking for Subversion support. I'm asking whether Git and or GitLab will be compatible. I'm not expecting an answer at this moment, but something for the team to consider.
And I'll try not to get too far ahead either, but I have asked that question before, and my understanding is that that GitLab is based on Git and will have the same functionality. So we would expect that GitLab will you'll be able to use the connector to connect to GitLab.
Okay.
And yeah, sure. It's worth.
Yes, I think any Git repository will work as long as it has personal access tokens enabled, because that's how we connect securely to it.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry for a little bit of curt answers. I got some work going on in the background, so I got my finger on the pause or the mute button.
No problem. Yeah. So other things that we've identified, the kinds of things that that we do in that they're when you have many things are identified by IDs, and when you export from one system import to another, that those IDs are broken. So this is an area where we're going to try to assist to better handle ID, or at least tell you what needs to happen, what things to look for. So another one is that many of our users use JavaScript, and they have module IDs. The module IDs are assigned by DNN at the time the module is dropped, and they're simple integers. So you put a module on a page, it gets a module ID. You do it on one of your other systems, and it's going to get a different module ID because they're not going to stay hand in hand in sync. So module numbers, if you've used them in JavaScript, get to be a problem. So you either have to update them, or I've done things like this before where I've used tokens to identify where some modules are, or other more esoteric methods, but you've got to go find those.
On that note, I believe Patrick said you were thinking, and I'm not throwing Patrick under the bus again, but yeah, you mentioned GUIDs using globally unique identifiers instead of the regular IDs for the plant and app side of things, but obviously DNN will still not be using GUIDs for that.
Right, for things like the workflows. So when you when
Right.
you have a workflow identified in a form, we're moving towards having that workflow identified by a GUID so that there's less need for changing things.
Might be a suggestion for DNN to consider using GUIDs as well. Not that you need more work to do, but maybe we can throw that into the community there.
Definitely. Another thing that is worth consideration, but I don't know to what degree it would help. But there's ways that you can also, when you're regarding the JavaScript, there's ways that you can map the ID of the module by using the module title in JavaScript. So that that's not something we want to get into deep discussion here on, but that's possible as well. So that can help.
Change your reliance from IDs to titles, which you have more control over.
Yep.
I wonder if there's opportunity in the export import in the future versions of plant app exports imports to be able to have a configuration to tie together the DNN module IDs with the plant app solution, so that when you import it, it asks you, what identifier is relevant for this particular import. I'm not thinking it all the way through, but it sounds like it might be an opportunity that it's a configuration on the import.
Yeah, that ties into a thought that I was that I've just been having with started off when we began talking about Git, is what is the scope of a solution, because and particularly how when you export from a form, you're just exporting from a form. That's not really the solution. It's because the solution is likely going to include a grid somewhere, a page with maybe other modules on it, and so really to identify a logical and functional unit, or a piece of functionality, a simple module export is not going to be enough. The next level of granularity that is inherent in the way that DNN and Plant and App work is the portal. And so you could have an instance of a whole portal, but certainly the way most of us talk, an individual portal will be made up of separate pieces, chunks of functionality, which will themselves comprise of a number of modules, maybe a number of pages, chunks of JavaScript, a bit of CSS customization. And I'm wondering if there needs to be a way of describing, these assets together make up a piece of functionality. I should be able to tag these. And when we look at Git and the versioning, that this collection of assets are grouped together and versioned, so we can extract them together. Now that becomes much more complicated. But I think going forward, if we're going to start thinking in terms of solutions and coherent pieces of functionality, we're going to have to find a way of collecting together these different chunks.
Great thoughts, Jim. I'm kind of seeing an XML file in the mix here somewhere where you define the solution, which is a combination of modules and
yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, and it has an identity, and you can use. Well, we some time ago moved, certainly for all the tables we've been creating manually. We've stopped using incremental integers as the unique identifier, and have moved to using GUIDs because it gives you a lot, many more advantages than it does. It causes problems. So I can imagine, as you say, XML or JSON or something that you define these things belong together.
So for you, those of you that have this situation, multi-environments, are there specific things that you'd like to talk about that you do every time when you're moving content from one to another, or how you get it to how you accomplish it?
I think I mentioned before what we've done in one of the systems we've developed is we actually do it by taking you take the DNN instance that is the test instance, and take a copy of that and restore it over the top of the test instance. And when you're happy with that, you take it and restore it over the production instance. It requires a bit of work to make sure that the data you're worried about survives and is managed. But as it, going back to what I was saying about granularity, the way we've done it is by taking the whole DNN instance as that single as the unit, and moving that, and that way we ensure all of the IDs match, that what we're using in production is exactly what we've tested. I don't recommend. Well, it only works in certain situations, and it's a real pain in the butt to do it in practice. But it's the only way we found in doing it.
Yeah, that really scares me, Jim.
Yeah, as I say, I think I mentioned it in a previous one. It relies on the fact that we don't use the DNN user ID as an identifier for any of the data, and the data that's being collected and manipulated through the system is not held within a DNN or plant and app database. It's held in a external database that we link in. But yeah, it can be done, and it does work, but it requires quite a different way of thinking and structuring things.
Yes, I remember now that you have described that before, and it's I think may be unique among our clients in thinking that far outside the box, or so holistically. Anyone else have suggestions or face this issue? Is that to say everyone is doing development right on production system and not facing it? Some of you in that circumstance?
I guess I have a question, Dale, about because we're people that look on the back end and query a lot. I did notice plant and app environment configuration table, and it only had production in it, but it looked like there was some thought put towards having other environments like development test. Now, this goes against the way I would prefer to have environments isolated, but can you maybe talk to that? What plant and app does for environment isolation, or maybe that was an incomplete development. I'm not sure.
Yeah, my understanding is there was thought at one point about supporting multi-portal, yeah, multi-portal with Plantain app. So we've discussed that in the past, that we stepped away from that. It's one Plantain app per instance is where we landed. So I think this table, even though it would support multiple entries, there's just going to be one row, and so it's a place to store those settings, but it's at this point I don't believe that we're planning to expand on it.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. Okay, so if there's no one else with suggestions, I think I mean I'm not in a rush to close out of that, but if I'm going to take your silence as time to move on. So we'll be working on providing a document, and we'll share that back with this group in general and Andrew, you in specific. Cool.
Thanks, Dale.
Sure. What else? I haven't taken a look at Campfire to see what contributions are out there. If there's anything new. Yep, nothing since my contribution on the 20th, so nothing new out there. Is there anybody on the call who is not a member of the Campfire Contributions website that would like to be? Again, the idea is that we're sharing bits of code and solutions to try and solve things. And anyway, if you're not part of it and you want to be, feel free to just put your email to me on the chat and I'll get you added. In the meantime, I'll just kind of conversationally, Patrick and I were working on an issue yesterday, and we looked to this site for a bit of something we knew that has been done before, or how can it be implemented, and it's just a nice reference of technique. So we find it useful. Hope you do too. Last week we told some ghost stories, some things that scary when it came up, and found a way to solve an issue. Is anybody going to have a low-code ghost story this week?
Do ghost stories include time sinks? Where you spend a lot of time doing, searching for your ghost.
I'm sorry, searching for your ghost.
Yeah, like don't call a control field event, or because it breaks the JavaScript.
That's
And it raises the question: is there a reserved word list someplace that we can document something like that?
So I just want to make sure I understand. In your case, you were doing some JavaScript. You use a JavaScript reserved word.
In my case, I don't know if it was a JavaScript reserved word, or in Plantain app, I created a drop-down list called event that was linked to other drop-down lists, and it would populate, but when you picked it, it would not. You would having that control on the page, when you click the actions of an action of a button, the JavaScript actions and things would not fire.
And just for clarity, is it event with an S or singular?
I believe it was a singular.
Okay. So you weren't trying to place any JavaScript on the form?
No.
Okay.
But like I could, in tracking things down, for instance, I couldn't get it to fire actions that, like a toast message or something, or things like that, to try to track down the problem.
Interesting. So I haven't encountered this particular one before, but So thank you for mentioning it, because I'll try and reproduce this, and
I can export the page and send it to you.
oh, bless you, that'll save me half an hour.
So,
So please do that. But and I encourage you, when you find things like that, I mean, it's great to bring them here. If you open a ticket for them, even if it's a solved, you know, hey, and we have a couple of folks that do this. Mark doesn't happen to be on the call today, but he sent me a, hey, I don't need help, but here's what I found, kind of a ticket, and we'll take those and convert them into something for the development team to work on. So yeah, if you'll send them to me in any form or open a ticket,
okay.
I'll make it happen. And then just the concept of what you're talking about, reserved words. I've made the mistake several times of using creating properties on entities that use SQL reserved words, and of course SQL is the back end for all of this, the database for all of this. So you can get yourself into a case. Interestingly, I mean, it will work, right? But sometimes the SQL that you then have to create, if you're going to query directly using SQL, like on the SQL console, or if you're going to use a run SQL action, that you end up needing some extra brackets and the around the field in order to identify it and set it out as not being a SQL reserved word, not the usage of that word. So I mean, the easy advice is to not use SQL reserved words as property names. It helps just avoid you to, and you mentioned, you know, Jim mentioned time sync, hunting for the ghosts, trying to figure out why something doesn't work when it you know, the syntax looks like it should. So anyway, SQL reserved words we advise not using them, and we have an enhancement in our backlog to warn you when you try and use one, because there's, I don't know, 150 of them. So there's many opportunities that you wouldn't think will get you. But for me, it's the obvious ones. I mean, I created something called a case. Well, of course, case is a SQL reserved word. So even the obvious ones will get you. Anybody else encounter that? Anyway, very good ghost story. Anybody else have a ghost story, something that they chased after this week or had to work hard to find a unique solution? I'm going to go back here and find this other slide. Okay. Then I think we're on to, you guys are quiet today. I guess this will be a good one. This will be a real good one. We can take a minute on this. Feature requests. I don't know how many of you were following along, but we actually moved one we talked about last week. If we look at statuses of completed, we added a simple save button to the workflow designer, and not that this is very exciting interface, but I will show it to you. When you're editing a workflow now, you'll have the option to save and test, or save and close. So we've added this simple save button to it, and when you click it, it just saves it. It says workflow saved, done deal. So this I hope to have out as a hot fix probably by next week. I've asked about getting it pushed as a hot fix, but it is tested and working, and And so hopefully that'll make a few of you happy. Thank you for the thumbs up, Jim. All right. So I'm going to go with last call. If you have something that you've been hesitant to bring up, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll call it here.
I have a general question.
Yes.
Dale, I thought I'd mentioned I had a.
Okay, Patrick, you hold on for a second because Jim has a general question.
Just on a new app I'm working on, I am using cookies instead of session variables, and I don't have much experience with the downsides of that. Other than, is there anything I should be looking out for?
Yep. So a couple of things. One is that I mean, certainly any site can deny you cookies. So I mean, excuse me, any browser can choose to deny you cookies. So you got to have a fallback or a test plan to say, you set a cookie, you check it immediately, verify that you're getting it, so at least you know that you've got it. Are your users? Is this like a corporate setup or a?
Right, it's internal at this time.
Yeah, so it would be the kind of thing that you would say, yep, you got to have cookies turned on. You require that. Cookies can expire, and I think there's content about that. I mean, you can set the date, but they default for a pretty long time, I believe. What else?
Yeah.
Browser to browser, they can be somebody goes incognito or opens a different browser, they're going to get a different experience.
Yeah, I mean, my hesitancy over the years of doing it was always one of the server not being able to get to them to use them in a page or something, but at least in today's world that does not seem to be the case, because my pages seem to perform just as quickly with whether it's a cookie or a session variable.
Yep. I guess that does remind me of another issue that I've done sites that heavily relied on cookies and had a lot of data, and in that case, it can definitely slow down transmit speeds. I mean, I'm talking about I was loading just a ton of junk in the cookies, and then not using them, but they were transferring with every request in that particular instance. So it was kind of a big slowdown until you cleared out the cookies. So as long as they're smaller and not hugely voluminous, I mean, I don't know how many you're thinking, but 10 or 50 even short cookies, I don't think you're going to see a performance. It's when you try and store tables in there, it gets to be ugly.
Thank you.
Anyone else with comments or experience on cookies? Patrick, you've got to have done some. Matthew.
Yeah, I have used both cookies and session variables. And I started off relying on session variables quite a bit. What I found, and this could just simply be the technique I was using, that when you needed something immediately, sometimes the browser, you would set the cookie, but the browser, and maybe it was in a different module or something, it wasn't aware of it in a timely fashion. Whereas when you set a cookie, it's there immediately and then available for everything to use on that page. We talked at a previous session about kind of the quote unquote reliability of session variables, and not that they're unreliable per se, but that they are, from my experience, not necessarily available immediately right when you need them. There seems to be some refresh required that using cookies simply, it obviates that requirement at all. The other thing too is you can set the cookies as session cookies so that when the user ends a session, closes the browser, those cookies disappear. So you don't get this necessarily a high kind of backlog, if you would, of excess cookies. And I've found them to be more reliable and more helpful.
That's good. And do you know, is that session cookie concept? I've seen that, but I didn't see it in any of the Planted app examples of using cookies in with the token.
Yeah, if you go to your tokens interface on Planted app, then just search for cookies. In the introduction of them, there's a whole section on how to structure the cookies to either be a regular old cookie, a session cookie, or a cookie with a defined expiration date. And it's actually very straightforward, as long as you remember to do it. As long as you remember to set it up that way, it works great.
Is it this one, the non-persistent equal true?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. But if you just click on the cookie, Dale, the actual in the left, yep. There's all the documentation. And then I just simply copy and paste those things down under usage and then plug in my changes, and it works like a champ.
Okay, and I was not interpreting the non-persistent piece to be related to session.
Well, to clarify, it's when the user, if you've ever been on like a banking site and they say for security purposes, not only log out, but that now close your browser. That's a session cookie, because if I understand it correctly, when you actually close out Chrome or Edge or whatever you're using, that gets rid of that session cookie in its entirety.
Okay, yeah, because what I'm seeing is right now that when I come back into the app, the cookies I had are still there, which could be good or bad depending on their usage.
Yeah, and also too, on that topic, on certain of my button actions, I go out and I erase the cookie. You've got that cookie remove, which is, just above that. Yep. So I deliberately erase that. So if you really want to be sure, you can attach that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Patrick, you were jumping in earlier. Did you have something that you wanted to add?
It's not related to this, but are you getting ready to?
Oh, I was gonna play with cookies a little bit, just to learn something a little bit myself about that. But you're welcome to.
I can say that related to this conversation in the past, I've experienced the same struggle about whether to use cookies or session variables, and I believe that I ended up going with cookies for the specific use case that I was at that point. Session variables definitely work well in some cases, but I would say that the cookies will can be more reliable, definitely.
Does anybody know if non-persistent cookies are under the same rules as persistent cookies. So, you know, every website you guys have visited for the last couple of years says, are you okay with us using cookies? And that's, I believe, persistent cookies. Is the session cookie seen more as a functionality of a website, web app? Does anybody know that?
My understanding is not so much the function, the mechanism of the cookie, but it's what it's storing. So if it's a cookie that is required for the site to function, then it comes under the legitimate use. You know, it comes under the category of these are functional cookies without which the site wouldn't operate. So those are all right. It's the optional ones that you have to give people the ability to object to and opt out of.
Thanks, Jim.
So just a comment on, so I'm using, in this app I'm developing, I'm using cookies fairly extensively from the admin side where they're going to, you know, they're an internal user. But to minimize any GDPR exposure, I'm using one cookie, which is a GUID. And then based on that GUID, I use the technique that Dale created, which was that utility table. I forgot what exactly you called it. That's what I call it in my use. And based on the GUID, it goes, once the user hits the site, they write the cookie, and then the actions themselves go use that cookie to grab whatever other data is necessary. In my case, it's like a project ID reference. It could be more information about them as a user, but I'm not ever at that point for the end user where I'm, you know, it's more sensitive. I'm not storing anything of theirs. I'm not tracking anything of theirs. And that GUID cookie itself is simply a session cookie as well. So that too will disappear once the user leaves the site and closes the browser. So for what it's worth.
Okay, so you guys saw how long it took me to find the cookie in Chrome. That was funny. But so this, then it's a, you can see the definition of it. It's related to the domain, the path. It's a session cookie, and meaning it's going to expire as soon as you drop away. And you see all the characteristics of it. So if we go to, if we, so now we can change the value of our cookie. Where did it go? Application. So there it is, and it's still a session. I'm gonna change my form to turn off the persistent attribute. Or I could have used the default. Let's see how it changes. So we get the value, but now it has an age component, and I assume that that means forever. I don't know. So since we didn't set a time frame, it's gonna last until it gets clear, it looks like. So anyway, that's the way you can set them and see them and play with the persistence of them.
Can I ask you to do one other little test while you're there, Dale?
Sure.
In where you're doing, in the actions where you're setting the cookie, in the create update tokens, where you have the NV value coming back, if you have two actions in a row there that that are doing something and not returning a value. If you use NV in both of them, what I was seeing was that it was only executing the last one. So I had to rename the token, the NV to 1, NV to 2, NV2, NV3.
Yes, that's my understanding as well.
Okay.
You can stack them, however, you could do this. Yeah, you're evaluating these cookies. You're having forced them to evaluate.
Okay, I hadn't tried doing it in that way. Okay. Yeah, I just went to the second one and just named my tokens NV1, NV2 for each of those, and then it worked. So, okay.
Yes, absolutely, it will work. I think it probably does it in multiple steps. And these things, yeah. So just for fun, let's try that out. And so so we have a session style and an expiring style, and they both set. So, yep. But yes, you can't name them the same thing, you know, dummy, because you don't really need the value typically when you're setting a cookie. So you might call it NA or dummy or whatever, and then do it multiple times, and yes, only one will fire. All right, any other questions about cookies? Good one. And thanks for jumping in with that one, Matthew. Okay. So now we've used most of our hour, so I am going to sing our closing song.
Patrick had a question.
Not a question. Well, it is kind of a question. I wanted to ask to see if I had a client ask me this week if we could do a toggle switch instead of a checkbox, and I see now that we have we have Bootstrap 5 at our disposal. That's probably is pretty easy, and I wanted to know what you guys thought. If that seems like something that you've wanted and would like to see.
So toggle versus checkbox, it would just be a.
Yeah, you see it pretty commonly. Actually, Dale, if you go to the Bootstrap 5 site, we can.
No, this is a different one, but
Actually have a.
Is it bootstrap5.com or? I think we can. This kind of toggle switch here.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yep, looks like it would be a nice option to have on a checkbox, because it's gonna.
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of putting it as an option when you do a checkbox or a checkbox list, that instead of checkboxes you have toggles. And so not a new field, but just an option. I don't know, just put it out there since we're slowing down a little bit. So I see Justin's putting in the chat that he thinks that would be useful.
Good. All right.
Cool.
Well, good one. So I had a little time free up last week, and I made a form for myself, and you guys probably saw me use this here a second ago. That the whole point is to create pages with content on it, so that I can quickly reproduce the things that you guys send my way. And so this is taking advantage of some of our page management features. So for example, I have a menu where I want this page to be created in the menu. So I'm putting things in my April folder right now, and I give it a title, and I hit create a test page, and it automatically created the URL. And it's still a little bit in test mode, so I my create test page doesn't automatically jump. I have to hit go. But if you haven't used these, this is kind of this is one of those features that I didn't even know was in our product, and we get I get surprised by the depth of things that are there. So we have a create page, and I'm gonna, let's see, I think this is, these are in, does it say, yeah, portal management. So there's, in portal management, there's all these add module, existing module, delete the page, load a page. So there's lots of different functions there. I used a create page to create a page under my existing title, and I've used the DNN templating mechanism. So I've created a template, and I'm up to version 4 on my template. But you pick a template, you connect it to a particular page that you want it to be connected to, and it results in a URL and a page ID. So then we can do more with it. And in my case, I am this page contains a tab, a grid, and a form, so it's ready to go. And so it has all the different features that I would typically use to reproduce something, and I just delete out what I don't need. So I use the delete module to say, well, if we're not including tabs, then we remove the tabs item from the new page. And so so I do the same thing with grids and forms. So the ability to just kind of dynamically create a page, I didn't realize that that was there, and that's my time-saving effort for last week. I just do this all the time, pretty much every time you guys submit something. So thought it'd be interesting to show behind the scenes. And now I really have, unless there's questions about page management or anybody else commenting that you're using that, portal management, that's built into the Plantain app. Okay, now I will sing us out. Thank you guys attending Low Code Campfire for this Friday. We will be back here again, same hour next week, and we will see you then. Thanks for a good session.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
Thanks, everyone.